President Donald Trump has entered office. One of the things he was saying that he was going to do from the beginning is make a stronger military. And he did not hesitate to get moving on that track almost right from the beginning. Now that he has Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has been confirmed and now is in office, he has been releasing just a slew of executive orders really across the board in government, but especially in the military and for the Department of Defense. A lot of things have been hitting the ground lately. And we wanted to try to make some sense out of all of them. There's quite a few, so we won't go through all of them. But I do want to highlight a few of them. Some of them I think are very good and they're very long overdue, and I applaud them. Some things are have the potential to go sideways, and it's going to be difficult for the incoming administration to manage them effectively so that they don't end up doing harm. And then there's some things also I'll tell you that are a little bit concerning to me. First, let's start off with the top three priorities, which I do completely concur with and really like. Here is Pete Hegseth at the event of his signing into office when he laid out the top three priorities he believes from the president.
We will put America first. We will bring peace through strength. And the three principles I talked about are what we will bring to that Pentagon. Restore the warrior ethos in everything that we do. Rebuild our military. And reestablish deterrence. We don't want to fight wars. We want to deter them, as you said.
Love that last part above all. We don't want to fight wars. We want to deter them. It's something that has animated me from the beginning, from the first time I joined as a private in 1985. And as I became an officer later and all throughout my career, and definitely since my retirement, I'm all about having a strong national defense and making sure that we never have to use it, or at least making sure that we don't use it unless absolutely required to for our very security or our lives. What I'm opposed to is those who have been in power for quite a long time now and certainly been in the ascendancy is those who want to use it all the time. They don't want it to be a last resort. They want it to be a first policy choice. And they have gotten their way a lot. It almost doesn't matter what party you're talking about over the last, really since 9/11 especially, but even going back a little bit to the Clinton administration and the George Bush administration before that, back into even the war that I participated in the armored vehicles in Desert Storm. But since that time, that we have been really diverted a lot, and a lot of it started. Some of it started under Clinton. The Obama years kind of took things in a bad direction too, in terms of the organization and the culture of the United States military. Trump kind of tried to turn some of those around when he was in his first term, but honestly, to be frank, he had so many other priorities and other things on his plate. He didn't spend much time on the military, other than wanting a strong one and getting a big budget. But he didn't really take much of a hands-on approach. Apparently, he is in the intervening 4 years has decided that's something he wants to be a lot more hands-on. And so that's why he specifically selected Pete Hegseth and gave him a very strong charge into the Pentagon. He says so he wants to restore the warrior ethos, his top three priorities. Big supporter of that. One of the things I think that was lost even before I retired in 2015, this is already starting to wind down, because we were talking about wanting to be, leading by talking to people a lot and winning hearts and minds and all that kind of stuff, with the focus on counterinsurgency fight. That was one of the big distractions we were doing, even under George Bush, the Republican. They wanted to do nation building and things that are feel good and all that. And then we were really retraining a lot of our people, absolutely retraining entire brigades. We formed brigades that were designed to do counterinsurgency stuff, not warfighting stuff. And that by definition, if you're taking your focus and putting it on there and you're forming these kinds of brigades that are supposed to win hearts and minds, then you're obviously not doing warfighting stuff. So your core things, your armor, your infantry, your artillery, your air defense, all of those kinds of things, engineers, though, you have to really focus on what is the most important thing in your kit bag if you're a Department of Defense. And that means making sure that you have the warrior ethos. Because if anybody is in under any confusion or doubts now, they should be eliminated by looking at the barbarity and the horrible nature of warfare between the Russia and Ukraine. If you're paying any attention at all, looking beneath the headlines, you see that some of the actions on both sides is just barbaric, and it is a horrible, horrible environment at the point of contact. You've got to have a military that's focused on the warrior ethos. That means that not only do you work hard and train hard and understand that the tasks are very difficult, that also means you have to understand that there could be sacrifices necessary, that it could be ugly and hard, and you have to keep going anyway. You could be wounded yourself. You could have some of your friends wounded or killed, and you still have to go on with the fight. And you have to be trained to do that. That doesn't come naturally. It has to be inculcated in the spirit. That is the warrior ethos that says we will get the job done. We will accomplish the mission, whatever it takes, whatever the cost. And if you're talking about fighting an existential war, you have to have that. If you have guys that are too focused on nation building and winning hearts and minds, and all of a sudden they get into a knife fight, then you can't learn that on the fly. That'll cost you if you're not prepared for it. And as long as we have the professional ethos that says, hey, we have the warrior ethos, but we're also highly professional, we're well-trained, we're disciplined, then that means that you don't just go off in a lot of violence, because that can have catastrophic results of its own. All of those things are part of what I understand to be the warrior ethos. Certainly what it was when I first got into the military. That was part of the focus. And in the 2nd U.S. Cavalry, as I first became a second lieutenant, that was the first unit I was in. That was part of our absolutely unequivocal mentality. All of those things, professionalism and getting the job done, following the laws of land warfare, doing what's right, not what's easy. All of those things are necessary. And if you bring that back into the centrality, then the armed forces can get a lot stronger. You can probably also do better in recruiting, because the loss of that's one of the reasons that I came in, because of that standard that was high and the challenges that were significant. But the people that you're working with wanted to have excellence and to defend the country. We've gotten away from a lot of that. And I'll talk about the DEI part in a minute, but that was all part of the disparity, the diminution, I guess, the weakness of that warrior ethos, because too many other things were being talked about and brought into the fore, and too much time spent on these. So you're not doing on the warrior ethos. Now then, that's what he says he wants to do. He also said he wants to rebuild the military. So there's the ethos, which I think is the most important part, and I'm glad he mentioned that first. Then there's the physical rebuilding, because we don't need a bunch of brigades to do counterinsurgency. I'm not sure if they even still have those anymore, since they did it when I retired in 2015. But if they haven't, that certainly needs to be done. And we need combat brigades. We need brigades that can actually fight on the ground if we need to. And then the idea is all of those two things really go together to build a strong force, so that it reestablishes deterrence. So people won't take us on, because they won't think that we're a weak force and we don't know how to fight, or that we don't have the will to fight, or the will to sustain a fight. You want to get rid of any doubt of anybody's mind. They need to know that if they're ever going to choose to go to war with the United States, they better have it strapped on tight, because they'll know they're going to have a tough fight, and that the cost will be too high to get whatever it is they wanted to get done, so that you deter them from even trying. That's the objective. And if those are the three priorities, then I think Secretary Hegseth is going down a right path here. Then he had some other, on his first full day in office, he addressed a lot of people and talked about some of the other things that he wanted to get done.
If you see what the president said last week in his executive orders, he's hitting the ground running. He's made it very clear. There's an emergency at the southern border, that the protection of the sovereign territory of the United States is the job of the Defense Department, and the cartels are foreign terrorist organizations. As a result, this Pentagon Snap 2 last week, we helped move forward troops, put in more barriers, and also to ensure mass deportations, support of mass deportations in support of the president's objective. That is something the Defense Department absolutely will continue to do. Removing DEI inside the Pentagon, reinstating troops who were pushed out because of COVID mandates, Iron Dome for America. This is happening quickly. This is a shift. This is not the way business has been done in the past. This is the Defense Department will support the defense of the territorial integrity of the United States of America at the southern border, to include reservists, National Guard, and active duty in compliance with the Constitution, the laws of our land, and the directives of the Commander-in-Chief.
So a lot of things there. Let's try to unpack some of that. So one of the first things he said there was that they have designated cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. that's kind of in the yellow flag territory to me. We have to be really, really careful with this. Because listen, it's one thing to try and secure your border and to make sure that, especially any kind of illegal drugs, don't be coming across. And there's the cartels are been quite good at that, because there's unfortunately too big of a demand in the United States, which makes it very attractive and financially beneficial for them to keep doing so, because so many of our people actually are hooked on drugs. So we do want to keep it out. That is a big issue and something that needs to be done. That's why I'm a firm supporter, big green flag, on supporting or defending our borders, securing the airspace above our country, defending our littoral areas and the physical ground borders. That all needs to be secured. And that just should be a basic function of government. That shouldn't even be a question, that we need to defend our borders so that anything that nefarious to our country doesn't come across. And anybody that doesn't enter the country that we don't haven't authorized for whatever means, whether that's just people visiting, whether that's any kind of people wanting to come across they want to immigrate. We have to have a good laws on the books, and whatever the laws are, the Department of Defense has to execute them. So the DOD and the Pentagon don't set priorities for what kind of immigration policies. That's done upon Capitol Hill. But whatever those laws are, whatever's on the books, the Department of Defense needs to keep them active and make sure that everybody's complying with them. That should be also not very controversial. You may not like the laws, and if you want to change them, fair enough, go through the legislative process. But in terms of the Defense Department, whatever those laws are, that's what's going to be enforced. But the issue of the cartels, though, could complicate matters. Because by designating them as a foreign terrorist organization, that leaves open some gray legal area that some may want to exploit, and perhaps could at some point could recommend to the president that, hey, how about we use this legal authority to actually conduct offensive operations and specific strikes inside Mexican territory, or even inside Canadian territory for that matter. And that is a slippery slope. Number one, it's almost certainly going to violate a lot of international laws about sovereignty of in another country, unless it's done in cooperation with the host government. If it's done in cooperation with Mexico, then you're at least on better legal footing. But I'm just telling you, we should focus on blocking any attempt at getting in illegal drugs into the country. But if you start physically going after the cartels, then you could be opening up a whole can of worms. Because if you designate them as terrorist organization and then start acting on it and killing some of these cartel members, especially on foreign soil, then everybody needs to understand there are actions and then there are counteractions. There are results, there are consequences too. And if we think that we're going to go in and kill a bunch of these cartel folks and that's going to make us safer and that there won't be any counteraction, you need to disabuse yourself of that. If you take that action, you need to understand that there is going to be a counteraction. And almost certainly then they will start conducting terrorist activities in the United States. They will probably start attacking border patrols. They will probably start attacking some of our troops that are on the border, especially anybody that has anything to do with attacking them in their territory. They are going to return the favor. So far, there hasn't been any of that, or at least not much that I'm aware of anyway. But if we start going on down this path here, we need to be extremely clear-eyed about what we could be getting into. And we have to very carefully weigh the pros and cons. I get it. On the surface of it, you say, yeah, they're doing bad things in America. They should pay. Fair enough as far as it goes. But if in the process of trying to, quote, make them pay, you end up stirring up a hornet's nest, and now all of a sudden we're starting to pay prices on our side, and then the net to the United States could be a loss, and it could be more violence and more people killed, etc. And then still may not stop the flow of illegal drugs. So you have to be very careful here that you don't just get into a fight and it doesn't solve the problem, and it may even create new problems. So that needs to be a yellow flag that we need to make sure we're clear on that point. One of the other things he said was that there's going to be mass deportations. This is also a tricky situation. If there are people here in our country illegally, they violated our laws, they've overstayed their visa, they've come in illegally by whatever means, if they are not legal residents of the United States that have followed our laws, then it certainly is arguable that they should be deported. But it's not as simple as that. It's hard to find where a lot of these people are. There's going to be lots of, family issues that are involved and family members, and just people need to understand that's going to be part of the cost to doing this. There's the issue of finding them. And I'm telling you, it's one thing for having a number of raids that we've been seeing in the last week or so that the administration's been doing and really going all over the place in the United States. Those are relatively small numbers. It's like 1,000 something, I think. A couple of days, I think it actually got up to 1,000 people that were captured. If there are actually 11 to 15 or 20 billion, or million, illegal people here that have violated the laws, that's a ton of people, and it will take enormous resources to actually go after them. There's also the second and third order effects of it. What happens to all of these, businesses, farms, other kinds of or companies that where a lot of these people are working, and if suddenly they're gone, that could cause a real big problem because they're going to be. Well, I mean, let's just pick a number. Let's say 10 million. Are there 10 million other Americans that can just immediately go in and pick up the slack so that those jobs keep getting done? Probably not. So you have to weigh the cost and the benefit of it. Is it really beneficial to go en masse and get these people up? Where are you going to get the tens of thousands of people that it would take additionally on top of what we already have with the Border Patrol and law enforcement of various types to be able to manage this? How are you going to physically get them out? Where are you going to send them to? All those things need to be discussed, and it's just a hard call. I'm not going to lay out what there's no easy answer to it, and I'm not going to say, oh, well, they should do this instead, because it's a thorny situation, and there's pros and cons to both sides here. But we need to be clear-eyed again on this, as with all these issues of the second and third order effects before we go in and doing something and seeing, will this actually benefit the country? Or will it just create a whole different set of additional problems that we also have to navigate through? That's something that the administration and the Department of Defense especially needs to take care of. The other thing, there's a lot of words so far on this getting rid of DEI, so-called, the woke tactics and whatnot that a lot of people have been on the conservatives have been talking about for quite a number of years here. This is also a pro and con kind of situation. It's not an easy that, everything that was associated with DEI is bad and wrong and needs to be gotten rid of. Some things are positive. So we need to go in with a surgeon's scalpel and make sure that we take care of people at the same time. Now, some of the things that the president's his executive orders have said, and Gary's showing you some of them right there. There's a lot of good things to be had here. I can tell you from when I was on active duty, even in 2015, these things were already starting to percolate, especially during the Obama administration. There was a lot of focus, not so much on standards, not so much on merit and who can do the job, who can't, but on quotas. Now, they never use those terms. They always use, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we just want everybody to have a fair shot. A lot of the words that were used were fine, but the way that was applied, and I can assure you at the leader level, the message that came down was very clear that no one ever used the word quota, but everybody understood that's exactly what was intended. And if you don't have at least a number of people from every category that was highlighted, then you're going to hear about it. And so then that just created a really kind of a fear among the leadership class that now then they're afraid, if they had, 3 people that they wanted to select or they had to choose from for a certain job, for example, a command position. And they're like, okay, instead of just going, all right, look at all of the fitness reports, all the what they call the OERs, officer evaluation reports. Let's see who did the best, who had the best performance. Okay, this guy's probably the lowest one, but these two, that's a tough one. But you know what? We're going to go with this one because of XYZ. Yes, we're going to put that one forward. Instead, they had to say, okay, all right, well, this guy seems the best on paper, but he is from, race X or from religion Y. How many other people do we have in command in that category? Oh, that's too many. We can't have another one. How about the race Z? How many of those do we have? Oh, we don't have that many. Okay, yeah, we're kind of short on that. All right, we better put this guy forward. That's just what was happening. That's just the truth of it. I don't care what anybody on the left wants to believe. I can tell you for a fact that's exactly how it was going on in there. And a lot of the teachings and the briefings that were required, basically gave the impression that if you didn't have these views, you're wrong and there's something wrong with you. And they basically made you feel guilty if you know, of a certain race or gender or anything else. If you weren't thinking this way, there's something wrong with you. You need to change the way you think. So they expressed that, and I'm just telling you that kills morale in the organization and in a company and in a military organization. So Trump is coming in and saying, all right, we're going to get rid of all that stuff. And I can tell you from certain knowledge that has had an immediate effect, and all this stuff is getting purged across all of government, not just the military. And that can be good as long as we focus. And some of the executive orders did specify that they want high standards. And I remember seeing an interview with Pete Hegseth where he was asked, I think it was on Fox News, a very pointed question. And he said, yes, there will be high standards. Everybody can meet it. And they said, what about women? Can women be in combat? Because before, when he was just a civilian, he was interviewed once where he said flat out, no women in combat. Well, now he's saying, yes, women can compete, and there will be one standard for everybody, and it will be a high one. Now, I'm for that as well. There does need to be a single standard, because the objective in the Department of Defense, as opposed to really anywhere else, even in government or in civilian world, needs to be on what is going to produce the greatest combat capacity that there is. Not what is the most popular, not what would we like things to be like, but if you take policies that talk about human relations, and you try to put in all this other stuff that elevates class, that elevates race, that elevates a religion or a political viewpoint, if you do those kinds of things, then you just kill morale in the unit, because now then people know it's not based on who's going to be the best fighters. It needs to be, it sounds trite to say, but it needs to be colorblind. It needs to be race blind. It needs to be everything except capability blind. And it needs to have a sharp light on that. If you can produce, if you have performed, and if you have every reason to think that you can get the job done, I don't care if there are 10 straight, black women that come up and there's, white men and whatever else. If all the evidence shows that these 10 black women should get them, 10 straight black women should get the job, or vice versa. It shouldn't matter who's the best for the job. And listen, I've served with many women. I've served with people from every single color, race, and religion that you can imagine during my 20 some odd years of active duty and reserve duty on top of that. And I can tell you, there are fabulous people from every single category that you can imagine. Americans all, everybody who wears the American flag on their shoulder. There are some tremendous people here. And truly, the diversity that in the country is a strength, because a lot of people bring different strengths to bear. And you put all that together, and it can really have a good organization. And all of it together can make us the best military we can. If you only have one category, if it's only this certain race, if it's only this gender, you don't get anybody else, and you just discard capabilities from other groupings, then you are going to harm yourself. So that's why I say they got to be careful even how they do this, because you don't want to get into the situation where it's going to say, okay, now only people from my race and my gender and my religion are going to get promoted, and I'm going to, scuttle everybody else because there's no more equity. If they go by what the words they put in some of these executive orders, which there still needs to be equality of opportunity. Let's see, how did they phrase it? I think I wrote that down on here. Can't find it at the moment. Well, they said that they don't want any identity politics. They want equality of opportunity, 100%. If they do that, that's going to be a good thing. But everything, as they say, depends on how it's actually done at the point of contact. We'll see how that works out. Let's see. I've already talked about the warfighter mindset. That's exactly what needs to be done here. The Iron Dome, an Iron Dome for the United States. According to these executive orders, they want a next generation missile defense shield for the United States. They want it to be against ballistic, hypersonic, and advanced cruise missiles. This is one of the biggest absolute green flags that there are. This is for sure what we need to be doing, both at the strategic and operational levels, even down to the tactical level for that matter. The Russia-Ukraine war, the Azerbaijan-Armenia war of 2020, everything that's been going on in the Middle East since 2023, all of it screams that air defense is absolutely essential to be able to fight and wage and win a modern war. If you can't knock out the enemy's drones, if you can't defeat them with electronic warfare or physical means, if you can't knock down the missiles that are coming in, you're going to lose. Your side is going to lose at every level. I mean, you're seeing that there's a constant battle back and forth between Ukraine and the Russian side, especially on coming up with new kinds of technology, new kinds of drones, especially new kinds of defense mechanisms, electronic warfare. Then the other side will figure out how to counter that, and they'll come back with something new until that works for a while, and then that's countered, et cetera. All that stuff is iteration that's going back and forth at practical light speed. And we're way behind the eight ball on this. And if we don't put a lot more effort and energy into this, then we could find ourselves in difficult to an adversary who is very good at this kind of thing. And especially with, some of these new categories of weapons, these hypersonics, right now, nobody has the ability to intercept those. And that includes the actual Iron Dome in Israel. They don't have the ability to intercept some of the faster missiles as it is because technology just hadn't caught up with it. So this is something that we should be pursuing with the understanding that there's no silver bullet, not in this either. There's no magic force field like you see on these sci-fi movies or so, Star Trek, Star Wars, whatever. That only exists in the movies. It doesn't exist in the real world. So there's no system that's going to prevent everything from getting through there. So you got to get the best that you can, and then make sure that you have enough, especially interceptor missiles, to sustain yourself. And that also will require digging in deeper into the Defense Department and its sustainment capability. Let's see. One of the last things I want to talk about here, a couple of different things actually. In the news, actually, this afternoon, there was some Caroline Leavitt, the new White House spokesman, came on and was talking about some breaking news that former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, had his security details stripped and is under investigation as well. Here's how she put it.
We heard that Pete Hegseth has now taken away the security protections that General Mark Milley has. Ahead of his confirmation, Pete Hegseth said that his priority would be focusing on the warriors within the military as his number one priority, not politics. Is this putting politics before the warrior workforce by focusing on what seems to be punitive in the eyes of many critics?
No, the first action that Pete Hegseth took when he showed up at the Pentagon was telling that the warriors that work within that building, and most importantly our service members who serve this country in uniform, that DEI would no longer be a part of the United States military. We're focused on lethality, we're focused on strength again, and we're focused on rebuilding our military, which is something we haven't seen over the past 4 years. As for General Milley, the president's position on this remains the same as it does for John Bolton and the other individuals. He doesn't believe that these people should have the right to have security clearances and private details for the rest of their lives. Again, taxpayers are funding it, and the individuals you're mentioning are quite wealthy, I understand, so they can get their own private security if they want.
I have a couple questions.
Now, as you may recall, there's a lot of bad blood between General Milley and President Trump. Back in 2020, I believe there was a big action. There was a lot of protests going on just outside the White House, and Milley was famously what some later would say was used as a prop to be behind President as he walked out into the area where they were dispersing a lot of protesters. He was not shy. Milley himself was not shy about talking about that subsequently while he was still in uniform, while President Trump was still in office. That caused a lot of bad blood between the two. Milley said he didn't like the fact that he was out there. He said he should have done something different. There was a couple of other issues that were also big, which I think are valid to say, hey, we need to ask some questions here. It's a little late to be doing some of this because now it does kind of look punitive. But at the time, just before the transition of power in 2020, at the end of 2020, so first of 2021, when Biden administration came in, there was some concern that Milley had overstepped his bounds and talked to some Chinese generals and assured them that there was not going to be war between the two and that nothing was going to happen. And there's some questions on both sides whether that was authorized and normal. Milley said, yeah, I've had an open door to the Chinese for a long time. We just wanted to reassure them that nothing was going to go on because there was lots of turmoil with, would Trump give up power? Would there be a problem? Some said that, maybe he'll strike out at China or something, and as a last ditch effort to stay in power. Didn't ever see any realistic possibilities of that, but for whatever reason, Milley felt that it was important enough he wanted to talk to the Chinese people, and that was really perceived as a stab in the back by many in the Trump administration, who basically, you're signaling to the Chinese that you don't trust your own president, and so you wanted to assure them that nothing crazy was going to happen. I certainly thought at the time, and still do, that his actions there were not warranted, because there was no evidence that Trump was going to do anything of the sort. There was no threat by the Chinese against us, and therefore, why would he do anything? So there was no reason for Milley to do that, and I think that did put us in a negative light. In my view, one of the bigger things that he did negatively, though not illegally, and that's important to point out, was that Trump had given an order before he left office that he wanted all of the U.S. troops out of Afghanistan. He wanted it to have happened, if I'm not mistaken, by the 16th, I think, of January of 2021. So just a few days before the Biden administration would come in. And instead of executing that order, Milley took the then acting Secretary of Defense into Trump, and I'm not sure, we don't know for sure what all happened behind the scenes, but somehow he succeeded in convincing Trump to just make it go down to 2,500 and keep it there, and then we'll let the Nixon administration figure it out. Even though there was already on the books the Doha Accords, which was going to say that the U.S. would be out of Afghanistan by May 31st of 2021, no matter what, regardless of who won the presidential administration. And Milley did absolutely nothing to execute that mission. As a matter of fact, he specifically took no action in order to say, well, we'll just push it off to the Nixon administration, expecting that the Nixon administration could be counted on to be also coerced into just keeping those troops there indefinitely, which is what he specifically said that he wanted, and he admitted under oath, by the way, as well. But that wasn't successful, as Biden ended up saying no. So because Milley didn't do what he was ordered to and took no action, he took it upon himself to decide which orders he was going to obey and which ones he wasn't. That was part of the cause of the disastrous withdrawal that the Biden administration did in August of 2021. A lot of blame goes on to the administration itself and how it was handled, but he deserves a lot of the blame as well, and has not gotten much of it. He testified a year or so ago, and as a civilian, and really tried to paint himself as a hero in this thing, and frankly, that didn't work out very well. And so if they want to check into some of those things, that's fine. But I don't see any evidence, even though I disagree with all three of those processes, I don't see any evidence there's anything illegal. You can say that it was bad and he should have been fired, and I think he should have been fired. I think I actually wrote something to that effect, that he should have lost his job because of some of these things. That's fair. But listen, no matter what we may think of his behavior, we need to make certain that we don't get into anything punitive, that we don't take, political I don't even know what the right word is, actions against him that aren't by force of law, but just because we don't like what he did, they did, make up something or so and do something against him. Because he has the ability, even if I don't agree with him, he has the full rights, especially as a civilian. He's written a book, and he was very, very critical of Trump and has used some pretty strong language that he thought he was a wannabe dictator and some other things. As reprehensible as that may be, and as much as, especially if you're a Trump supporter and you may not like it at all, we still are a free country. You have the freedom of speech, and everybody's free to give their opinion on the things, even if you don't like them, as long as you don't break any laws. And unless there is some law that I'm unaware of that he's crossed, we just need to be careful that we don't get into a situation to where we use the power of the office of the president to take punitive actions against somebody just because we don't like what they did or said. Something we need to be taken care of. We are a free country. We should hold people accountable for what they do, but we need to do it within the confines of the law. Last thing, and this was just before we came on air here, Gary was able to pull this off of a statement that the president made, and he's talking in the context of what was going on with the deportations and the fact that they're getting rid of a lot of people that were criminals in the United States who were here illegally or so. And he had, a rather interesting solution to some of this.
We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them because we don't want them coming back, so we're going to send them out to Guantanamo. This will double our capacity immediately, right? And that's a tough place to get out of. Today's signings bring us one step closer to eradicating the scourge of migrant crime in our communities once and for all.
Okay, this is a red flag here. This one's not even yellow. This one's a red flag. This is something we got to be really, really careful about. There's lots of problems with the detention facility at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba already. Lots of people have been in there since 2001, since before that in some cases, and certainly a lot after that point here. And look, we have to be a nation governed by the rule of law. We have to be a nation that keeps itself safe, that defends itself from its enemies, and that destroys anybody who tries to destroy us. Those are non-negotiables, and that's the case for every country on the face of the planet, for example. But this is a difficult situation because Guantanamo, the way things have worked there, hardly anyone ever leaves. He made relevant reference to it's a hard place to get out of, not meaning to try to escape, but like legally to ever leave there. And you have to be very, very careful before you put large numbers of people in there who may have broken laws. And in fact, anyone who's broken a law has the right and we have the obligation to bring them before a court of justice and to let them make their case. The government will make its case, and then the judges or the jury will render a verdict, and then we'll abide by whatever it is. But if you send a lot of people to Guantanamo, one of the problems that there is many people are incarcerated, have been for decades, and they've never been brought up on trial. They've never seen their day in court. And that is not the American way. The American way is that we are a country governed by the rule of law, that we have justice and we have a system to provide it. And that means we can bring charges against people who we claim have violated laws, and then they have the right to defend themselves. And if we put them in Guantanamo Bay and don't give them the right to ever face trial, then literally what you're doing is putting them in jail indefinitely with no trial, no sentence, no anything, and no prospect of ever getting out. And why do you want to put 30,000 criminals or incarcerated people into this area and just leave them there? I mean, that's not a value anywhere. That doesn't help us out. That just says we're going to put the problem over here, and it puts a black cloud on us, frankly, because then it says that there isn't the rule of law, there isn't the ability to defend oneself, and the right of defense, and the right to have your day in court, literally enshrined in the Bill of Rights. And so that is something that we got to be real careful about. Now, listen, I think that this is probably going to immediately come into a great deal of legal challenges. I'm sure that there'll be people that will, file lawsuits, all kinds of things. So this is a long way from being a done deal. But just in the concept, I think it's something that we need to give a lot more thought to. And as with all of these things here, the administration needs to be very careful that we don't get too careless and wanting to run before we've even crawled or walked, because we could, if we don't execute these things well, even some of those that are really good ideas can stumble and fall and end up costing us or not being improved, or even causing more harm than good if we don't think them through enough and at least foresee the second, third order effects, et cetera. Those are things that the administration needs to do. A lot of the concept I'm all for, but I caution being careful and thinking these things through a lot before you start taking actions. You don't want to bring a chainsaw to something if what you really need is a scalpel, because then you can end up destroying something that you need later on. That's something we need to watch out for. So that's it for our show today. I just wanted to thank you for coming on today. As we always do, we value your time here, and we're always grateful when you watch for us. And we'll keep on tracking this stuff as it happens. A lot of these are, executive orders that have been on the books now, but we'll see how they actually transition into actual action later on. And we'll give you an assessment of whether it worked or didn't work, because we are unintimidated, and uncompromised to bring you the truth, no matter what it is, no matter who's saying it. So we'll continue to do that for you. Thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.